So basically today we are going to discuss about the feedback mechanism. But to know what is the feedback mechanism, which is basically a physiological process, we have to know what is homeostasis. So homeostasis is basically maintaining equilibrium. So it is a difference between living and non-living organism, that a living organism can maintain homeostasis within its internal environment, but a non-living thing always needs an external source to maintain equilibrium. All the cells and the organ system, they function all together to maintain that equilibrium. Just imagine in a cold environment, does anyone tell you to shiver, or it happens just spontaneously? It happens spontaneously. So why do we shiver? This is maintained by the feedback mechanism. It actually, all the muscles contract and it create heat so that we can maintain the internal equilibrium. Same in hot environment, nobody tells us that, or we don't tell that let us sweat it out, right? It happens spontaneously. It also acts by the feedback mechanism. Next slide. Now, what is feedback mechanism? The feedback mechanism is a physiological regulation process by which the internal homeostasis is maintained. Every living organism cannot change. In our life also, we cannot be thermostat, okay, which keeps on changing according to the external environment. We have to maintain the homeostasis to maintain our internal environment so that we can have a good and healthy life in general also. So the feedback mechanism is of two types. One is negative feedback, one is positive feedback. So let's start with the negative feedback. What is negative feedback? Just imagine some obnoxious stimuli is surrounding us, but our internal environment is maintained. By which process it's maintained? Just imagine a negative stimulus is around us, but we give ourselves a feedback. No, we don't have to change according to that stimulus, right? So a negative feedback system involves the detection of the undesirable condition and the response to make that condition ideal. For example, we are actually looking at a device to understand the physiological changes that happen in the environment or our internal environment, such as a thermostat, which I have given example. It changes according to So let's start with the thermostat. It changes with the change in the external environment. So these are the components of the feedback. First, we'll see the set point. Like, just imagine for this room, I want to maintain it at 20 degrees centigrade. So this is the set point for this room. Then the control center. It basically detects the changes in the environment. Then the effector. It executes the changes that is necessary to maintain the temperature. And the variable is basically the room temperature, which changes according to the external environment. Now next, move to the next slide. Just imagine the temperature of this room falls below the set point, which I have set in 20 degrees centigrade. Okay. Then the control center, that is the thermostat, decide the correction is needed. Okay. Now the thermostat will think that, okay, I have to correct the temperature. Then comes the effector response. What it does, it turns on the heater. It turns on the heater and the room temperature rises. But as soon as the feedback goes like the temperature has risen to 20 degrees centigrade, the thermostat turns off the heater. Same, when the room temperature rises above the set point temperature, imagine it turns on the AC. The thermostat, it basically turns on the AC, brings the temperature to a cooler 20 degrees centigrade. It's the same mechanism, the same feedback goes. When the temperature comes to 20 degrees C, it will again turn off the AC. This is how our internal environment also acts in the same ways. Now, let's go to some of the internal environment, and you will find most of the feedback in the endocrine system. So it basically acts by the hypothalamus, pituitary and adrenal axis. We call it HPA axis. It's very important and you will have to study it throughout your MBBS course. For example, just imagine there is some kind of stress, like whatever stress you can say, somebody is feeling sleepy. Okay, somebody is feeling sleepy. He is doing overtime. It's also a stress. So under the stressful condition, basically the hypothalamus will release corticotropin releasing hormone. Okay, it will stimulate the pituitary gland to release the adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is ACTH. Then the adrenal cortex will be stimulated by the pituitary with the help of ACTH to release cortisol, or it is called the stress hormone. Then the cortisol has some function like increasing the blood glucose, suppressing inflammation and boosting the energy level. Now, where the negative feedback acts? After you have released a certain amount of cortisol, your stress is gone, everything is maintained, it will give a negative signal to the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Go on and stop the release of the hormones that is necessary. Otherwise, cortisol itself has some bad function over the cortisol beyond the physiological level. It also has some bad effects. Like you will have insomnia, you will have weight gain just because of high cortisol. So it will go on, give a negative feedback, go on and stop the release of the corticotropin releasing hormone and the ACTH. Now, in our digestive system, it also acts by the feedback mechanism. For example, the most important example is that of the insulin. Just imagine, we have eaten something, right now you are all fat, your glucose level increases in the blood. Now, it will stimulate the beta cell of the pancreas. The beta cell of the pancreas will secrete insulin. The insulin will, this process will be taught in the biochemistry by how it uptakes glucose. So we just go to the superficial stuff that in the muscle and the liver, the glucose is uptaken. Once the glucose level falls, then there is again a negative feedback that stop releasing insulin. Otherwise, your glucose level will drop to that level. You will have what is called like hypoglycemia to that level, or you will just pass out. Secondly, like when it's low glucose level, there is stimulation of the alpha cells of the pancreas, which will release glucagon. Glucagon will process like from the liver, it will help in supplying the glucose that is necessary by gluconeogenesis or glycogenolysis. By this mechanism, your blood will again maintain the glucose to a certain amount of time. And once again your blood glucose level rises, it will again send a negative feedback. So this is the overall that when insulin basically lowers the blood glucose level and the glucagon raises the blood glucose level. Now come to the kidney and the water regulation. So all of you know that kidney is the main organ that is in our urinary system, and the functional unit of the metabolic system or the urinary system is basically a nephron. So it is also interesting how even in our urinary system the pituitary plays a role. The pituitary basically secretes the ADH from the posterior pituitary. ADH and oxytocin is released. Always remember that. From the posterior pituitary, only two hormones are released, ADH and oxytocin. ADH is antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone helps in the reabsorption of water. So, just imagine there is less water in the blood or you are highly dehydrated. That time, a stimulus goes to the osmoreceptor of the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus then stimulates the pituitary to release ADH, antidiuretic hormone. This ADH acts on the tubules. There is some process by which aquaporins are developed, by which the water is absorbed from the distal nephrons. Similarly, when there is excess water in the blood, imagine the water is absorbed and there is sufficient amount of water that is required in your blood. That time it will again send a negative feedback to stop the release of the antidiuretic hormone. Then pituitary gland stops the release of the ADH, and the kidney basically function in a very physiological manner, how it acts without the ADH. Now this is basically the what we say, concise version of what I have said. Okay. Now the temperature regulation. Imagine if the temperature rises, your body, the surrounding temperature rises. What your body does? See, as the temperature has risen, it causes dilatation of the capillaries near your skin. So less heat, so more heat is dispersed in the environment, and we have a cooling sensation in the body. So though the outer environment temperature increases, the inner temperature remains cool. Similarly, sweating also plays a role. Sweating, the sweat is developed on the surface of the skin. As it evaporates, it releases a cooling sensation in the body. See, this is the skin. As the temperature rises, a water column is developed, and the body heat actually evaporates it. So it leaves a cooling sensation in the body. So this is the same mechanism. As the body temperature falls, there is vasoconstriction and there is less heat that is dissipated in the environment. Now this is an interesting fact. We all know, while in cold environment we have piloerection. We call it goosebumps. So why this happens? Basically, in piloerection, when the hairs in our skin, they get erected, it actually creates a insulating membrane of air, which prevents the external cold to get inside our environment, in our internal environment. Similarly, see, as the temperature falls, there is piloerection. So this is basically the air column which is developed. As the air column, it acts as an insulating membrane. So this is all about negative feedback. Anybody have any kind of question? Anybody? Cortisol. See, there will be dedicated lectures about the endocrine system. You can learn more about it in the endocrine system, endocrinology. So this is basically, we are learning about the feedback mechanism. If you have any question on the feedback mechanism, you can ask. Cortisol is an in-depth topic. That adrenal thing is in-depth topic. Because this class will almost take 2 or 3 hours if I go to cortisol. Cortisol only takes 2 to 3 hours. Anybody have any question? So this is, you said that some hormone increases to a level, but feedback basically starts from an external factor. An external factor is influencing you. Like stress is influencing you. At that, so we need cortisol. We need that time. That physiological level of the cortisol is not sufficient. We want more cortisol. So the cortisol level rises as soon as the stress is over. It comes down. Here the feedback mechanism acts. Okay, sit. Now let's move to positive feedback. So what is positive feedback? So positive feedback actually exaggerates instead of decreasing the state of the body. Okay. For example, the best example of a positive feedback is during childbirth. When you have labor pain during childbirth, there is contraction. Okay. During contraction, oxytocin is released. Oxytocin is released, which helps in more contraction. Similarly, while breastfeeding, when the baby suckles the nipples of the mother's breast, oxytocin is released, which helps in excretion of the milk or ejection of the milk. Similarly, prolactin also acts, which helps in production of milk. Another example is the blood clotting. Blood clotting in itself is a broad topic. There are coagulation cascades, anticoagulating factors, coagulating factors. There are so many. But all of you must know that it's also a positive feedback mechanism. Once there is a cut or an injured tissue, the platelets attract more platelets to come and release the clotting factors to stop the bleeding. See, there is also lactation. Lactation is also a positive feedback, so that more the baby suckles, the more milk is produced. This is basically helped by oxytocin. Oxytocin helps in ejection of milk. Prolactin helps in production of milk. So this is basically the brief about what I have told you. In most cases, only the purpose of the feedback loop is completed. The counter signals are stopped. Once your body has done whatever is supposed to do, the positive feedback also stops. Like once the baby is delivered, the positive feedback, like the release of the oxytocin, also stops. Similarly, once like you have a cut, there is clotting and a clot is formed. After some time, the clot also dissolves. And lactation, as you know that everybody for 6 months, after 6 months, the baby stops, basically it decreases or stops feeding on the breast milk. That time, lactation also stops. But after some time, lactation doesn't go on for forever, right? You all know it. You all know it. You are supposed to know it. So basically, when the baby no longer suckles, the lactation also stops. Now, this is third mechanism, which is feed forward. So the feedback mechanism, when there is a change, it actually stops it, brings the body back to the physiological condition. Then the positive feedback mechanism exaggerates the response, which is necessary. And the feed forward system, it actually prepares the body for the changes that you are going to have. Like, imagine you have food always at 2. You will feel hungry at 2. The feeling hungry is a feed forward system. Okay? That's all. Do you have any question?